So you all should be receiving panelist invitations, which just means that you'll have control over video, and we invite anyone and everyone who can join us via video this morning to do so. Our conversation tends to be more productive the more we have on video. So please accept that panelist invitation, noting that all the presentations are provided by the team. That just gives you control over whether you join by video or not. There may be someone from our team that's not on mute that had some background noise. Let's see. Give another minute for folks to hop on and then convert from attendee to panelist. There's some faces, yay! Okay, so we'll get in the bulk of our team here, and most of the registrants are on, it appears. So thank you all for joining us. This is the last of our virtual regional member meetings. It's the first time that we have done a regional member meeting, excuse me, this way. I think everyone has accepted the invitation to be a panelist, so we invite you to join on video if you're in a position to do so. We'll present some data today, and otherwise we'd like to hear your reflections on the things that we'll talk through on some surveys. And we really feel like introductions and discussion happen better over video. So I am Jessica Love, the Executive Director for Prosperity Indiana. We have Rita O'Donohue, our Director of Engagement on. Rita is waving there. Teresa works in operations and admin. She just waved. Carrie, will you wave? Carrie is our program manager for capacity development. We have Michaela, who is running our platform today. She's currently in AmeriCorps for a few more days, and then she will join our team permanently as our research and communication specialist. And then we also have Andrew Bradley, our policy director, on. Andrew, I think I saw at least one of our legislators who are joining us today on, if you want to do legislator introductions now.
Sure. Thank you, Jessica. And yes, I saw, to begin with, Representative Holly Sullivan on. So Representative Sullivan joined the House in 2014 and represents District 78, which includes portions of Vanderburgh and Warwick counties. She's the chair of the Roads and Transportation Committee and also sits on the Ways and Means and Rules Committee. So welcome, Representative Sullivan. Would you like to say hello to everyone?
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me. I don't know if I can stay the whole meeting, but I wanted to listen to as much of the presentation as possible to learn what you have to share. So thank you.
Great. Thanks again for joining us. And I believe that I also saw that we have Senator Vanita Becker on the line with us. Senator Becker represents District 50, which includes also portions of Vanderburgh and Warwick County. Senator Becker joined the Senate in 2005 as the ranking member of the Public Policy Committee and also sits on the Health and Provider Services Committee. So thank you so much for joining us, Senator Becker.
And I think we also have registered Senator Messmer, but we have not seen him join just yet. Is that right?
I don't see him. Senator Messmer, if you happen to be on, please speak up. Otherwise, if he joins later, we'll take a second to introduce him then. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. We also have some funder guests, some representatives from philanthropy. So Jill Carpenter, I saw is on. Jill is from the Community Foundation Alliance, so a number of community foundations under the same umbrella. And then also Christine Harbison. Oh, I'm seeing that you is on as well. I'm not necessarily seeing on video at the moment. And so we'll have you all introduce yourselves after we intro some of our members who are here. So, you know, just if you could all very briefly introduce yourselves. We have a number that are here today. So briefly introduce yourself with your name, where you're from, position, and then, you know, these are tough times during COVID-19, but we would love to hear a silver lining that you can share that has been a result, either resulting from COVID-19 or in spite of COVID-19, however you may see that playing out. And, you know, just for us, you know, that has been the collaborations that we've been part of during this time. You know, there are groups that we had worked with before that we're working with more deeply. And then there are associations and other partners that we really hadn't worked with that now we have, you know, regular convenings with. We're meeting with every other week, you know, and we're becoming integral parts of each other's work. And so, Gail, if you could kick us off with introducing yourself and then a silver lining that you might have seen during COVID-19. And I think you're on mute, Gail. There you go. Oh. I'm hearing some feedback, but I'm not hearing you, Gail. I'm seeing your mouth move. Are you on? There you go. You're off.
Okay. Got me? Okay. Good morning. I am Gail Brocksmith. I'm Director of Planning and Corporate Affairs at CAE for the Community Action Program in Evansville. We cover, for those that don't know, we cover Vandenberg, Posey, Gibson counties. A lot of different programs, Head Start, Early Head Start. We have foreclosure mitigation, weatherization, the Winter Energy Assistance Program. Right now we had COVID-19 money to help with rent, with water bills. We have our food pantry, diapers, all kinds of things. And we are having numerous calls for help on water, rent, and it's going smoothly though. Other agencies such as Aurora, Hope of Evansville have also received COVID-19 funding, so we're all getting that going. Silver lining, a lot of the customers were on our Winter Energy Assistance Program, so I'm able to do a lot of these applications over the phone and through email, so that kind of helps out a little bit. And everyone here in Evansville, and I've been told from other cities also, and Chris might be able to agree with that we all really work together here, and we collaborate in a really good way. So I'd say that's our silver lining. And just so that you know, Jessica, September 25th is my last day here. I am retiring. Yay! And Rashonda Bonds, I don't know anyone in the minority health field. She's our minority health coordinator, and she is be taking my position.
Okay. Well, you've been a fixture at our meetings. We're going to miss you, Gail.
Thank you. Prosperity, Indiana, and in its former life, you've all been really good to work with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that silver lining as well. I'm not seeing Neil on yet. So Lisa, I did see you, Abbott, intro and then a quick silver lining, if you would.
I'm Lisa Abbott. I work for the Regional Opportunity Initiative. I will confess that this is my 7th week here. So I wanted to join this meeting today so that I could get to know this region a little bit better. I've primarily worked in Monroe, Owen, and Greene County, but ROI represents about 5 counties in this region. So I'm working on housing and broadband issues right now. So that's my thing. If there's been a silver lining to this, and by the way, starting a job in the middle of a pandemic is interesting because all my coworkers are Brady Bunch squares. I think the silver lining is that we really have pulled together as a region to try to provide the necessary resources to our communities and our businesses in order for us to be resilient. And I have really appreciated seeing that firsthand. So I applaud all the efforts that y'all are making to fill all the gaps that this is causing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. And is Reverend Brooks on? I'm not seeing where he's on yet. I do see that Sarita is on. Sarita, if you could intro yourself and provide a silver lining.
Yes. Good morning. Reverend Brooks had to deal with his father this morning, so I'm trying to fill in for him. My name is Sarita Cavill. I'm with Memorial CDC and longtime friend with Prosperity and what you guys were in your former life, as well as Miss Jessica. I kind of agree with everyone else about the silver lining of the collaboration that we've seen here locally. I do have to brag on the CDC and the Memorial Baptist Church family, because in the midst of a pandemic, and we have not physically met for church services since March, but we were able to pay off our mortgage for our church this July. And we've also paid off one of our townhomes, one of our housing projects paid off one of their mortgages. And so in the midst of all of that, to see some debt go away is pretty awesome. So, but that being said, I love the collaboration that we've seen. And I think really people being able to pull together and be able to get their technology up to par. A lot of us nonprofits typically don't have the resources to purchase computers and laptops in bulk, and we've been able to do that through HUD and the city and some other small grants to be able to really kind of meet our clients where they need to be met through all of these virtual meetings and the technology that's needed to host it. So that's been awesome for me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I have not seen Tom Moore, and I know he was question mark. Michaela, keep track of any of these that might hop on, please. Is Laura Grove on? Okay. Joanna Peak. And that. Christine Pryor. Okay. Paula Craig. And then Rashonda had registered, but I'm not seeing her on. I know you said that was your, she would be your successor.
Yeah, we're working from 10 to 4 in our offices, so she might not be here till 10. She may have forgotten.
Oh, I forget you guys are, you're on a different time zone. And then I'm also not, Alyssa is here. Alyssa is a board member for Prosperity Indiana. Alyssa, can you introduce yourself and provide a silver lining? If you're in a position to come off mute. Okay, and then I did want to offer an opportunity for Jill to come off and speak to a silver lining and introduce yourself a little bit more.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm Jill Carpenter. I'm the CEO of the Community Foundation Alliance. We are 9 county community foundations in Southwest Indiana. Probably the silver lining, and I'm going to echo what some of the others from this region have talked about, is some of the collaborative efforts we've had. My board over 9 counties approved up to $1 million of COVID relief. Most of that was through rapid response grants that we provided agencies, about 650 to 100,000 there. And then we also supported the COVID-19 Crisis Response Fund here in Evansville, which is a collaborative fund of 5 counties. And so far, in 7 rounds of funding, we have away $1.4 million to 66 agencies and raised over $5 million for the effort. So that will continue for another probably 18 months through recovery and long-term help also.
Wow, it's great to hear that those resources, you know, are showing up at this time. That's wonderful. And Christine from Crawford County, can you introduce yourself and provide a silver lining?
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here this morning. Honestly, the silver lining for us probably was the realization of being able to work remotely and how that kind of geared us up for some other things that happened personally and professionally in our little world here in Crawford County. We are doing an emergency relief fund, but we don't have access to the kind of resources. Some of them are very small. We have about 10,000 people in the whole county. So we are doing some emergency relief, but not on the scale that some of those $1 million numbers that you all have been talking about. But we're happy to be here, and we're happy to work collaboratively with our partners in Crawford. And we're going to get through this just like everybody else, one day at a time and working together.
Yeah, thank you so much. Representative Sullivan, is there a silver lining you might share? Okay, we can circle back in later.
I think I figured out the unmute. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Great.
Actually, I think there's countless silver linings in this pandemic, although none of us wanted to go through a pandemic to find them. But from a legislative standpoint, we now have a very open dialogue with many different types of businesses and community groups across the state to have innovative conversations on how do we move forward with what we've learned, what we had to do to make it through the pandemic. Some of those changes need to remain. Some of those changes we learned we never want to try again. And some of those changes have led to agencies learning more and more about what Hoosiers need to have a healthy, happy family, as well as get to work and restart our economy. So those lessons that we've learned together as a state, I think, will keep us going at a rapid recovery here in our economy, but more importantly, keep us looking forward to innovative conversations about virtual schools and how we can manage government agencies in a different way in which we thought, because we always did it that way, we had to remain doing it that way. So those are all very exciting things that I think will take those conversations into the upcoming session.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
And Jessica, Alyssa is able to, we're going to unmute her so we can circle back and share for her.
Oh, okay, perfect. Welcome.
All right,
Hello,
Alyssa,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. Hi, everyone. Alyssa Prince with Hoosier Uplands. I'm also a Prosperity Indiana board member. For those of you not familiar with Hoosier Uplands, we're located in Mitchell, Indiana, very small town, and we're a community action agency. And as far as the silver lining for us, I think it has been helpful for some of our programs to work more closely together that haven't in the past, because we're just trying to do everything we can to help our clients the best we can right now. And again, one of those things that we probably should have been doing anyway, but it kind of brought that to the forefront whenever something like this has happened.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Senator Becker, are you able to come off of mute and share a silver lining? Is there anyone else that I
hear?
might have? Yes, go ahead.
Good. Well, I think that the best thing about it is that we have learned how to collaborate more effectively, and also how to approach state government in ways that we haven't before, and also local government. We have a terrific mayor that's doing a wonderful job of reaching out to everybody and collaborating and tying it in with the state government. So I think that you find out who your friends really are when you need them, and ways to collaborate to do a better job with the resources that you have. And I think that will prove to be very effective and helpful in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Chris Metz.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Chris Metz. I'm the Executive Director of Echo Housing Corporation. We are a community development corporation located in Evansville, Indiana. We focus on the Jacobsville neighborhood as well as the entire urban core of Evansville. Our strategic priorities at Echo Housing are really to continue to promote the development and to develop new affordable and supportive housing stock for our community, to engage in community and economic development, mostly through the lens of our Promise Zone initiative, and to provide quality person-centric supportive services from our team of social workers that we have on staff at Echo Housing. In terms of a silver lining, I've heard a lot about collaboration. I would say that's true, but I would also note there's been so much innovation, right? We've all had to do so many different things with less and in new ways. And one of my talking points is how do we keep this spirit of innovation that we've had through COVID? So for example, in Evansville, we've developed some new feeding programs to address the food needs. And as part of that process, we've learned new things, and we have new partnerships, and we're looking at how things have now been established as a result of COVID that we're going to carry after COVID to meet those needs. And we're having those conversations around food. We're having those conversations around housing. I'll share a brief silver lining internally at Echo Housing. We have about 150 households of affordable and supportive housing folks that live with us, and we were able to obtain funding to pay off the past due rent for all of those folks that had accrued during COVID. So all of our folks are coming out of COVID with no past due rent. So we're very grateful for the funding sources that allowed us to do that, and just happy to be here today. So hello to everybody, and congratulations to Gail. Gail, you are going to be missed. You are going to be missed, but congratulations to you.
Oh man, that was a fun dance there, Gail. You're getting ready. Thanks, Chris. I think that's really important. The things that we'll continue to take with us, after all of this is over. I did see Reverend Brooks. It appears you're on. I'm not sure if you're in a position to come off mute. If you are, we were just briefly introducing ourselves and providing like a word, and maybe a little explainer on the silver lining. We can circle back if you are able to share later. Now that we all know each other, I just wanted to take a moment, specifically give everyone permission to have beverages as you want to enjoy them throughout this process. So if it's coffee, Diet Coke, water, whatever. My team and I want you to realize that this is, do whatever you do if you were in a meeting with us in person. So, and then we will move on quickly on to the next slide. We've covered introductions. We'll go over COVID-19 survey that we did and the results. We have a policy priority survey that is currently open, and we'll share the results on where we are with those as well. We want to invite conversation throughout this, couple of action items before the meeting is over. Since we do have some folks who are not Prosperity Indiana members, just wanted to highlight in the next slide, we've been around for 30 years. We were IACD for the longest time, 30 years. And then 2016 rebranded to Prosperity Indiana. And so we are cross-sector. In the next slide, you'll see the bulk of our members are other nonprofits, and that includes homeless serving organizations. It includes community foundations and chambers and CDCs, CHODOs. And we also have, in our private membership, we have a number of banks that are part of our membership, utility companies that are members, and tax credit developers that are private developers, and then also a number of units of government, state and local government, a lot of community development departments in our membership. And then we did update our mission in 2019, and it focuses on the resources, engagement, and advocacy that are needed to support our network and to do the work that we're trying to do to create inclusive opportunities and really improve quality of life for Hoosiers. Our vision and values is on the next slide, and really on our vision, we just added the word equitable, which has served us well in this time of, during COVID-19 and racial injustice that we've seen. And then we think of our work through a framework of reaping prosperity. And so the next slide, just speaks to what we consider resources, engagement, advocacy. And we invite you to explore our website to learn more about the programs that are an amplification of each of those priority areas for us. So moving into our survey, which we did in May, and about 125 organizations participated. Sounds like somebody is off mute that maybe should go on. But and then I often say I'm not saying enough to hear much more than my own voice when I'm talking, so forgive me for that. So when we move into the demographic slide, I just wanted to call attention to the fact that the majority of our respondents have budgets that are in the million to just under $5 million range, so mid-size organizations making up the bulk of the response. And then of the respondents, more than 75% are nonprofit, which is fairly in alignment with what our membership looks like in general. So on the impact slide, at the time of the survey, nearly 50% of our respondents had 3 months or less of cash reserves on hand. And of those with budgets under $250,000, the majority had less than a month or 1 to 3 months of reserve. Those with the $250,000 to just under $1 million, most of them had 1 to 6 months of reserve. And then those that are million to 4.9 million, that's where we saw the bulk of that 10 plus month of reserves, a real sweet spot for that higher level reserve amount. And the 5 to 9.9, most indicated having less than a month of those who responded to us. And then the 10 to 24, all but one had 1 to 6 months. And then the highest budget range, the 25 million and up, really had an equal distribution of 1 to 3 months, 10 plus months, and some 4 to 6 as well. It brought to the forefront for us economic susceptibility of all organizations. That budget size does not necessarily indicate the organization's sustainability threshold. And, I think a lot of that may have to do with the structures that we work in and funding restrictions that we have. A lot of money flows into nonprofits and a lot of money flows right back out, maybe with not a ton of buffer to really build the sustainability long term for nonprofits. So, it's no surprise, we see what organizations are experiencing side, that there are budgetary implications, by close to 75%. Staff layoffs and furloughs and reduced programs were part of the considerations for some. Events and supply chain and volunteers and services have all been impacted. And, and I think that also can impact budget, as well. And then we'll stay on the slide for now, but on the next slide, you'll see that 82% indicated an anticipated decrease in revenue, and 94% indicated a moderate to high impact on their program services or general operations. And that was in May. So that was when we probably still thought that cases would go down in terms of COVID between then and the fall. And now we're seeing that no major dip will likely occur. And so, also recognizing that we talked about the limited cash reserves, but then also the expectation of revenue going down. Just wanted to have folks reflect, see if there was anything that surprised you in terms of what we heard back from those who responded to our survey, or if this is exactly what you're seeing either in your organization or organizations that you serve or serve on boards. Just how does this compare with what you've seen in your community?
I know that one of the big, locally, one of the big issues has been volunteerism. So for example, our Tri-State Food Bank, which provides, which stocks the 66-ish food pantries we have in our town that provides consumers, is almost very much driven by volunteer power. So when we couldn't get volunteers in there, we saw early on our food system kind of sort of lock up. And so there are certain systems that didn't realize how the volunteer dependent they were. Until this happened. You just kind of always assumed those systems would be in place. So I think that that volunteer piece is one that maybe we think about after our budget, we think about after our programs and services. But if you're in a volunteer dependent, segment of the nonprofit sector, it can lock up an entire service or resource for a community. So thinking a little bit more about that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been a striking for those who really are almost completely dependent on volunteers, and interesting to see groups kind of get over that hurdle and keep going. Anyone else have a reflection, something that struck you here that you're experiencing that's either similar or different in your community?
The one thing that I've noticed with it, and I see that it's the highest, the cancellation of programs or events, but in particular, the number of fundraising events. And especially for some of those that, one fundraising event sometimes is the huge bulk of resources for some of our nonprofits. And so I serve on the COVID relief fund for the Southwest Indiana. And so a lot of the requests that we have been receiving have been from agencies or organizations that have struggled because they've had to cancel their major fundraising event. And so that's been a struggle for everyone. I think throughout, and for others, it's been really hard if they don't get a lot of other resources coming in from, federal or local dollars. So it'll be interesting to see how well they're able to survive and continue on, or what kind of ways we're going to have to change, as Chris said about, changing the thought process on volunteerism. But even for some of these agencies, how do we help them and keep them doing what they do after this is all said and done, if they make it?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Sarita. And sometimes for some nonprofits that we've had on our membership, not having government funding is a source of pride for them. That they've been able to do it all through events and their own personal fundraising. And so, yeah, it's a shift for sure when you put so many of your apples in any basket, really. So and then. Anything we didn't capture here that you really are seeing in terms of what organizations are experiencing? We crafted this in April, kind of right after we went, into remote work, and anything major that this is not capturing that organizations are experiencing?
I would say that one other thing is a lot of these, especially smaller nonprofits, were not prepared for remote work. So, when we had to do the remote work, financially it was difficult for them to provide all of those services to their employees. And so I think that's probably an issue with some of our smaller nonprofits as well.
Yeah, great point. Thanks for pointing that out. On the next slide, speaks to how organizations are responding. What I think is important to note is that nonprofits are adapting. I think we've heard that in some of what you all have talked about today. And for many, I think nonprofits are actually busier than ever. I know we feel that way. I also know that that doesn't automatically equate to having more funding. And so, for many, I think it speaks more to the resolve of nonprofits than the resources, that nonprofits have. And so I think the data we collected also speaks to readiness to return to the office in terms of policies and procedures. I don't know if that then converts to a full return to the office when virtual is working. I know that's the case for us. We developed screening tools and have PPE and have the policies and procedures in place. And taking advantage of Families First, leave provision. So all of the things that you need to function well in a COVID-19 world, but and especially until recently, we really were paying rent, on empty space, and still now we may see a few people in the office during a given week. So I'm just curious what others, are experiencing in that regard. I'm seeing some folks that looks like you're in your office. What has returned to the office look like, or if you're still at home, what does that look like? Some head nodding. There's some Chris and Gail and Elisa nodding. That's one of y'all.
I'll share a little bit about Echo Housing. I am in my office, and I'll confess I've never left my office. We do have, like I said, 150 households of folks to serve. So early on, I kept one other social worker and one maintenance technician with me, and I just moved everyone else to work from home. Obviously, that was tough. We wanted to protect our staffs, and we wanted to keep them safe, but we wanted to keep them paid. And to do that, they have to be engaging in grant-funded activities, right? So it was a challenge to develop and define enough work, right? There were eligible activities under the grants that fund their salaries, so we could advance the mission of Echo while most of the staff was at home, keep everybody on task, keep everybody paid in that core group of us here that stayed, making sure that we were able to serve in terms of food and toilet paper and, basic needs, all of those households, and working with our employees at small organizations, folks had children out of school, right? Folks had people and their families getting quarantined. So I think really as small organizations, we really had to get real people centric, right? And think about our staff's personal lives and their families, and give a lot more latitude, right? I see, revisiting or updating sick leave policies. Yeah, we gave a lot of latitude. We wanted everybody to stay safe and healthy. And, at bigger organizations, there's usually somebody else to step in if that person steps out. But, we don't have that at small nonprofits. So just navigating those issues, I think, was challenging.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead and chime in there too. The first couple of months, almost 2 months, we were all basically working from home, and we were able, a lot of us, to get laptops if we didn't have them for essential staff, especially finance, HR, so that they could work from home. We came back first in just staggered hours. Some staff work morning, some afternoon, and now we are working, unless otherwise noted, we're working 10 to 4, and we're open to the public from 10 to 2. But like I said earlier, a lot of us are able to do a lot of things with customers, either over the phone or through email. But we are still making appointments for people to come in if they do not have that capability, or say they're coming for our food bank, diapers, things like that. So we've handled it.
Thank you. And then in our next slide, just, these are some things that our respondents said they wanted donors, funders, and government officials to know. So a higher demand for resources and assistance, operational costs have increased, there's cleaning and things like that may be new and different. Or buying those, the equipment that you need to work remotely. Flexibility is needed while we're adapting, high levels of stress, and just acknowledging that that's there as we're shifting things and have other things going on in our lives. That really, homes and food, those essentials really are the foundation of our health. And that's really called that, this time has really called that to mind. And then, the extra funding, that there is need for it, and it can be put out the door very quickly and efficiently, because the need is so great. And then in terms of beyond the need, but the most important needs, when we drill down there, on the next slide, funding availability rose to the top, again, flexibility of that funding, easing timelines and documentation requirements right now, and then support and understanding, from the stakeholders, that we have. And then in the next slide, just some reflections, some comments that we wanted to call out. Organizations and leaders are resilient, innovative, and continuing forward in spite of circumstances. the second one also, COVID has kicked everyone out of the box and then burned the cardboard. I think we probably all feel that or have felt it at some point as well. And then things may be delayed, but we will come back from this stronger than ever. And then speaking directly to policymakers and philanthropy, we can't do this without our partners. And so just wanted to speak into that. And then but also want to also pivot to the policy side of the work that we're doing and have been busy doing since we've been remote. I'll hand things over to Andrew Bradley, who is our policy director. For those who've been members of Prosperity, you'll know Andrew is new to us. He joined our team technically at the end of February, but kind of was launched into the State House, the first week of March, and spent most of his life there, for 2 weeks before we had to retreat due to COVID-19. And so he has mostly known us through the boxes that we now live in. And I think session ended late on a Wednesday night, and we went home on a Friday, the 13th. And so since most of our members haven't had the chance to meet him in person, I just wanted to, before he recaps 2020 a little bit, talks about where we're going with 2021 based on our surveys and conversations, give a little bit of more in-depth introduction to his prior experience, what brought him to Prosperity Indiana, just so you can get to know him a little bit better. So Andrew?
Thanks so much, Jessica, and it's great to be here with folks in Southwest Indiana. Again, my name is Andrew Bradley. I'm Policy Director. And as Jessica said, I came on right before the pandemic hit, just as the session was ending. I really identified with what Lisa talked about in terms of starting in the pandemic and knowing a lot of your coworkers, working with them through Brady Bunch boxes. And so this is how also I'm able to get to know and work with folks, members throughout the state. I also want to mention that I have some personal connections to Southwestern Indiana. My dad's side of the family is from Posey County, from New Harmony, so I used to spend a lot of time going down to that part of the state. In fact, I got married 5 years ago this November in the Roofless Church in New Harmony, so it's good to be talking with folks from that part of the state. Before I came to Prosperity Indiana, I spent half a decade with the Indiana Community Action Association and the Indiana Institute for Working Families, working on issues that deal with low and middle income families. And then for a year and a half before I came here directly, I was with a group in DC called the National Skills Coalition, working to improve opportunities for skills training programs for folks. So I really have that love and commitment for working with folks to bring them economic opportunities. And I'm really glad to be able to be here with Prosperity Indiana now during this really critical time where we're looking for ways to be able to best serve Hoosiers in the ways that they need them. So let's go to the next slide. What I want to talk with you about, I'm going to take just a minute and look back at what this process brought us last year. In terms of what the results of our member discussions and our policy survey led to for the 2020 General Assembly session. Then I'm going to take just a quick moment to give you a snapshot in terms of where Hoosiers' financial stability and housing opportunities were before COVID hit. And that'll lead into the discussion of what you've told us as members, what you want us to be working on for next year. So I do want to just take a quick moment. I'm going to turn to you a few times and specifically ask you for your input, but please feel free to jump in, ask questions, use the chat box if you're not in a place to unmute. The whole point of this is to have a discussion and dialogue. So while I'm going to be giving you a little bit of a data download, I want you to please feel free to jump in anytime. And then I'm also going to turn to you for some questions. So let's go to the next slide. So the whole purpose of this process is to inform what our priorities should be for 2021, especially the session of the General Assembly. And so the results of this process last year on the left, you could see this is what members told us you wanted us to work on. So on the left, you said you wanted us to work on affordable housing, including increasing renter protections for tenants, including addressing the appraisal gap for home construction that impedes production of affordable housing, You wanted us to work on expanding resources for Hoosier families and communities, including defending tax credit programs, such as the Individual Development Account Program, as well as the Neighborhood Assistance Program tax credit. You also wanted us to enact new state tax credit resources to support investments in affordable housing for low-income households. You wanted us to work on consumer protections, including enacting a 36% rate cap for payday loans and opposing predatory loan products, as well as providing common sense safeguards against predatory rent-to-own contracts that lead to borrower default. So that's what you told us. And then going into the session, you could see over on the right, things turned out a little bit differently. We ended up spending a lot of our time. In fact, when I came in late February and into March, spent almost all of my time to begin with on this eviction bill that started out in SB 340, ended up in SB 148. That was the bill that would have actually expanded eviction powers from landlords, and it would have decreased local government's abilities to install some renter protections. That, if you recall, ended up passing the General Assembly, but it was vetoed by the governor. It was Governor Holcomb's only a second veto, and that happened just as the pandemic was starting, and I think there was a realization that that wasn't a time to expand evictions in the state. We also spent time this past session working on SB 395, which reformed the Uniform Consumer Credit Code, including some different rate percentages, and has other effects on that consumer code. We're continuing to work with members on the implications that they'll see. Two other bills that didn't make it over the finish line, but were part of our agenda that we worked on. One was SB 327, reporting of consumer loans by unlicensed lenders. That sailed through the Senate, but didn't get a hearing over in the House side, on the committee side. And on the other side, HB 1191, land contracts, sailed through the House, but didn't pass the Senate. So again, want to take just a second and underline that it's really important now for us to hear what your priorities are, so that we know we can be able to tell representatives like Representative Sullivan and Senator Becker, who have graciously joined us today, what you want us to be working on. So let's go on to the next slide and take just a moment and talk about these. This is some really recent data that has come out that gives us a snapshot of where Hoosiers were before the pandemic hit. This one is from a report called Out of Reach from our partners at the National Low Income Housing Coalition, of which Prosperity Indiana is a member. And they found that affordable housing was already out of reach even before the pandemic. And this report, if you write down the URL here, it shows this data for every county in the state. And again, in all 92 counties, there is a gap between what the typical Hoosier renters are making and what it takes to afford stable, affordable housing. So across the state, it takes $16.32 an hour to be able to afford a fair market 2-bedroom apartment. So when it comes to hours needed to work per week, that ends up being 90 hours at the minimum wage to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And even if you split that into jobs, that's 2.3 full-time jobs. And then even for a 1-bedroom apartment, 73 hours is what's needed to be earned per week to afford a fair market 1-bedroom apartment. That's 1.8 full-time jobs. So as we will continue to talk about, housing stability has been a real top concern of our members, and this is what people were faced with even before. So even if there's any interruption in income, folks fall further behind being able to afford affordable housing. Let's go on to the next slide. Another aspect that really has come into play is financial assets and opportunities. This is from Prosperity Now's Assets and Opportunities Scorecard. Again, Prosperity Indiana is an affiliate for Indiana of this group. And I want to point you to the line under savings and assets that says save for emergencies. So you can see there that only 62% of Hoosier families had $400 saved for an emergency. So that means 4 in 10 Hoosier households didn't have any buffer for emergency. And these tend to be the lower and middle income families who are basically living paycheck to paycheck. And what you can see, the next rate under there, or the next line, is liquid asset poverty rate. That's another way of looking at, these are the families that don't have enough liquid assets to be able to survive at or above the poverty line for 3 months. And that's more than 1 in 3 Hoosier families that fall into that category. So again, this underlines that there were a lot of families that were basically like getting by where they were. But when COVID hit and you had job and income loss, even if it was just during that furlough time when we were shut down, even if they're starting to get back to work, those are the folks who are at most at risk, falling behind on their bills, and that could be subject to either predatory lending or to housing instability. So let's go to the next slide and see how that housing instability has played out. This has been the issue that we've been working on, day in and day out, because our partners have been coming to us and asking what's going to happen when the eviction moratorium is lifted. And now we're starting to find out. We're starting to hear reports that eviction filings have increased 200 to 300% in a lot of court cases. We've done some research that shows that we expect there will be multiple waves of evictions, starting now with the recent moratorium lifting. Another one once the state and local rental assistance runs out. As you may know, that state rental assistance portal just shut down last night. So there's likely to be another wave when people who haven't yet felt that housing instability go to apply and find it's closed down. And then we looked back at the last recession, the Great Recession, and found that evictions actually peaked the year following the unemployment peak. So even if there are no more surges in COVID, if there's no more unemployment, and April 2020 ends up being the peak in unemployment, we expect that there will be a later delayed wave in evictions that could come in 2021. And the problem is unless there's additional rental assistance and housing stability policies put into place, that's when those Hoosiers are going to find that there's really no additional resources for them. On the right-hand side, this was a map that we created of the most housing cost-burdened places in the state. Again, this is the places where there's the highest percentage that are paying more than 1/3 of their income just in rent. And while you don't see a lot in the southern area, southwest part of the state show up in the top 20, believe me, these areas are in all 92 counties. And in fact, we just got a new way of looking at this data that shows that in every county that there are these places where a large percentage of folks are at high risk of eviction because they were, number one, paying high percentage of their income to rent, and B, they were more likely to be affected by job and income loss, and then C, also places where there have been COVID hotspots. That's where we think that Indiana will need to pay some special attention in the future when more resources are available for rental assistance. So again, these are things that we've been working on a lot. Let's look next at what you've told us that you want us to be working on for the 2021 session. And again, just a quick pause to say these results are a snapshot. This survey is still in progress. I believe right now we've only received 6 results from the southwest part of the state. So I encourage everybody, once this call is done, take a moment, go back and find the link that we sent that was part of the invitation for this meeting, and make sure that your organization is represented here. So let's take a quick look first at what people have told us in terms of why Prosperity Indiana's advocacy work is important. So on the next slide, you'll see there, I'm going to take a little bit of water and let you take a look here at what people have told. So what you can see here, these are a variety of real responses. People saying that they appreciate that we are on the front lines working on that housing stability issue. You'll see that people are appreciate the action alerts and the information they give us. You'll also see that we have some suggestions here. They want us to continue working on affordable housing tax credits in the future, as well as several instances here where they turn to us for that information and advocacy on predatory lending and assets and opportunities, making sure that people don't fall prey to things like payday loans. So this is what people are saying. Let's see how that translates into what they want us to be working at the state level next year. So on the next slide, we asked folks across several different categories, including housing, including consumer protections and community development, what they thought were the most urgent areas to be working on in the General Assembly next year. And you can see these are statewide results so far. Next, we're going to look at what the Southwest responses have been. But statewide, the number one response so far is expand the reach of state and city emergency rental assistance and advocate for additional federal funding. And I think that's going to be really important again with the state rental assistance portal now shut down and Congress is stalled in terms of a next COVID package. We're going to need to turn back to our senators and be asking them to match what the House has funded in terms of emergency rental assistance and housing stability funds. Something that I thought was interesting was the number two response so far is people have told us that they want to make sure that Prosperity Indiana is advocating for racial equity in state and federal COVID-19 policy responses. And I think that's really important to note that this is something people have told this in comment, that they don't mean this to be an individual policy response, but they want to make sure that across all the other policies that we're advocating for, that we're looking for ways for those policies to be applied equitably to Hoosier populations and communities throughout the state. Let's go ahead then to the next slide, and we'll talk about some of the other individual responses. So this is the same category, asking people what are the most urgent COVID policy needs. So now here's a place where I want to stop and turn to you. This is in the responses we've had for Southwestern Indiana so far. Does this seem like a correct reflection of the needs that you're seeing in your organization and in your part of the state? So far, we're seeing the top responses have been support consumer protections on federal stimulus payments, tied with that response of advocate for racial equity, and then also increase COVID-19 funding for legal assistance and nonprofits. So I'm going to turn to you, but I'll just reflect that it seems, based on the discussion so far, people are saying that having adequate resources for the organizations that are serving Hoosiers and their communities is something that they're really concerned about. But what do you think? Does this comport with what you're seeing, or is there anything missing or that you think should end up higher for the Southwest region?
This is Senator Becker. Can I just throw a thought out there for you?
Sure.
I support and certainly appreciate all of these issues that you're talking about, but I did want to know if you are reaching out to legislators regarding the override of the governor's veto on the rental bill. Because
could you tell us more about it? I've heard that.
Now,
go ahead.
For an override.
So, Senator Becker, could you tell us what you're hearing? Because that's something that we've just heard as really just rumors that, maybe that would happen, maybe even on Org Day. Is this something that there's a concerted effort that we should be working on?
I think you should. I think you should be talking to legislators because the other side is certainly lobbying on that issue. And I don't know, I don't have any idea when it might come, but I just know because I've been approached by people that support that bill to support overriding the governor's veto, and I was gone on days of session, so I didn't vote on that issue. But really don't think right now is the time to be doing that bill. And But I also know that, as I said, the other side is lobbying on, might want to, the leadership, to Mark Messmer, Rod Bray in the Senate, and of course Todd Houston in the House, to see what their thoughts are.
I really appreciate that, Senator Becker, and I want to turn it back to others in this region to hear what they're seeing. Something that we have recommended from Prosperity Indiana and the partners we've been talking about is for there to be a housing stability task force that includes both landlords and renters and the folks who understand that connection between housing and public health to help inform policy decisions. Because based on everything that I've seen, just like you're saying, this isn't the time to be opening up new eviction powers before we take a more holistic look at what's happening with evictions during COVID. But what are others seeing on this area? Chris, Metz, I'd like to turn to you, Echo. What does the housing and eviction situation look like on the ground with the people you're serving?
It's really hard to say right now, and I don't want to misstate this, but here's how I understand the current process. We're not yet seeing evictions for non-payment of rent make their way through the courts. Landlords, the way I understand it, had to issue a 30-day notice for non-payment of rent, and that was not able to be issued until after the moratorium expired on the 15th. So we feel that there's probably a wave coming around 9/15, around September 15th. That's going to be the big one, right? Because that's going to be all of the folks that have accrued some past due rent during COVID. A lot of people were hyper focused on looking at the dockets on like the week after 8/15 and the week after that, and trying to use that as an idea of what we're going to see in terms of scale. And I think that's very misleading, because really all you're seeing right now in terms of evictions are folks that maybe did a lot of property damage or some other thing that does not involve non-payment of rent, right? So we feel that we're going to see that grow exponentially within about 30 days. So we're kind of, to answer your question, Andrew, we're all certainly seeing an increase, but the million-dollar question is, what does that increase look like when we start seeing these non-payment of rent, come through? The COVID Relief Fund, the statewide COVID Relief Fund is an amazing resource. So we're making sure that that's being administered, efficiently. I know there's been some challenges there. I'll just say that. Anytime you bring anything new of that size and that scale on board, that's going to be very, very difficult. But I think probably similar to everywhere, the housing market is stressed, the job market is stressed, and we're kind of waiting to see what happens in the middle of September, because I think that's going to be the truest indicator of the correlation between COVID and evictions, is that non-payment of rent piece.
Thanks for that, Chris. And I think that's really smart to be looking ahead at that September 15th date. We've been talking with some folks in like the legal aid sector, Indiana Legal Services, and then around here we have Neighborhood Christian Legal Clinic as well. And they've been part of some of the discussions with the Supreme Court on the new mediation process that the governor and Chief Justice Loretta Rush rolled out yesterday. And while we think that could be a really important key, one thing that we've been looking at is, just like you're saying, some of that data is really hard to get. Like, you have to literally open up every single case on the state's webpage. And, you would need volunteers working around the clock to create any sort of accurate picture for the state as a whole. So one thing that we've asked for is that there be a housing stability dashboard included on the state's COVID panel that would at least give us that idea of a few key metrics, like how many evictions are being filed, are they for non-payment of rent versus other reasons, and then how many folks in each county have been served by rental assistance programs. Any other reflections from folks on the line on that housing issue specifically, or anything else in terms of really urgent COVID-related policy needs that you want us to pay attention to? Before we move on, I don't know if Alyssa, if you're on, is there anything that you're seeing from your neck of the woods in Hoosier Uplands that might have a policy implication? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. Honestly, there's not really anything that I can think of locally right now that would be any different than what you guys are looking at statewide. You know, I've actually been surprised by us not having as many people coming to us yet at this point as far as needing rental assistance or needing utility assistance and all that, which I think a lot of it just has to do with quite a few people still being able to get by with the extra money that they had for a while with unemployment and everything. But I do worry once, you know, we do get into the evictions and everything, that's whenever we're going to see a lot of issues with our community.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for bringing that up, that idea of like, as some of the the moratoriums wind down and the existing assistance way, that there may be that delayed reaction. And something else, you know, again, I'm not sure if anybody has anything to say about this or not, but we did hear yesterday in the governor's briefing, Chief Justice Rush was mentioning that she was talking with FSSA head Jen Sullivan, who was saying that now 211 is part of FSSA, and so she was reflecting that that eviction requests and also housing and utility continue to be the #1 request coming in through the Indiana 211 portal. So it is interesting that is still a top place that people are asking for help. Well, let's keep this discussion going. If there's anything we didn't cover, there's going to be a few more opportunities to jump in. But let's take a look on the next slide. I do want to take a look at what people have told us in terms of their state policy priorities. So this is across, we just talked about urgent COVID-related areas, but let's go to the next slide and look across all the different categories that we asked people about, what they wanted us to be working on next year. And you'll see a few key themes rise to the top. So in terms of state policy priorities, the #1 vote getter so far has been increasing renter protection. So that's another area people want us to be working on, and they want to see that reflected in legislation. And Senator Becker, I think what you're talking about in terms of going backwards on renter protections, our members are telling us they don't want to see that happen. But coming in tied for second, looks like we have a 3-way tie so far. And again, this could change in the final results. The people are saying they want to see us work to make it easier for local communities to fund land banking efforts. They want to see us seek a 36% rate cap for payday loans and oppose predatory products, and then also provide momentum for new affordable housing tax credit resources. And there's a few other items on here that I want to turn it to people here on the phone. Anything here, does this, again, reflect what you want us to be working on? Is there anything that you don't see reflected here? Any categories that are missing? There's opportunities for comments certainly on the survey, but this is a good chance for anybody to bring up anything missing or that you want us to be working on more.
I don't see anything missing, but I will just note the appraisal gap. The appraisal gap is something that we're having a lot of conversation about locally in the Jacobsville neighborhood and in Evansville. Full community development is impossible if there's not some aspect of new home construction happening, right? And so we've been talking strategically about how can we maybe start with a small focus area, find a little bit of a subsidy to close an appraisal gap, build some homes, and see if we can start to raise, values in a smaller focus area as kind of a model or pilot to see what that would look like in a bigger area. But that's a key piece that's missing in the community and economic development initiatives in most of our urban cores is how do we spur new home construction? What we always say in the area where we work is if you build a new home, if you drive the last nail and walk back to the sidewalk, it's about worth $25,000 less than when you drove the last nail. And that's just, very, very difficult to imagine, comprehensive community development in neighborhoods and communities where someone can't construct a new home unless it's subsidized or public funded. So we see that as an indicator of the status of, the economy in our communities, and also an important issue to look at moving forward.
Chris, I appreciate that. And one way that I've been thinking about this as it's been talked about, and other members have talked about this as being something that's important. One way that I've thought about it is that, the state and everybody, of course, has been thinking about COVID response in the short term, but we also are going to need to think about how do we transition from response to recovery and to rebuilding. How would you characterize how this appraisal gap fits into that idea of getting back to rebuilding?
Well, obviously, we're concerned we're going to see an increase of people entering poverty, an increase in people entering loss of their homes, including entering homelessness. So if on the restorative side, if we're developing new solutions, right, and we're increasing that housing stock on one side where we're seeing an increase in the need on the other side, and we're trying to keep that equation balanced, I think we're certainly moving in the right direction in terms of developing solutions that kind of will address the increased need that we're starting to see there. One thing that we've talked about locally is can things like an affordable housing trust fund provide that subsidy, in the language that we would use, talking points about that is let's just say, some numbers we've thrown around is if we feel like if we build a $125,000 house in our neighborhood, it would probably appraise for about 90, right, when we walked away, or 100. But so let's say it's 100. So the subsidy that you need is really only about 25–30% of the project cost. As where a lot of other publicly funded housing initiatives, you're asking for a much higher percentage. So using verbiage like, wow, $30,000 of public funds can unlock $100,000 of private investment, right? And making sure we're using those talking points. I think there's a lot of opportunity around that model, right? Because the minority of the funds going into that deal would be public and the majority would be private. So.
Mm-hmm. Great, and I think that you'll see that reflected a couple of slides down once again. But before we move on from the state page, anything else we want to say? I don't know if we still have Representative Sullivan on the line. If you have any reflections from this in terms of how this might fit into priorities for next year, or anything else that comes to mind based on what you've seen. I want to turn it back to our state representatives and senators on the line before we move on.
Andrew, Representative Sullivan had to leave for another engagement.
Okay, no problem. Senator Becker, if you're still on, anything else that you're seeing here, any reflections from what our members are telling us, or things that we should be prepared for next year?
Well, I think actually your initiatives look good, and I would just say don't take anything for granted. As you know, during the legislative process, things can happen in committee at the last second that you're not prepared for. So I would just say, I would love to see the payday loans initiative and the cap go through. I've always supported that. So I would certainly encourage you to talk to committee members and the chairman early on in leadership as well. So, and I'm going to have to leave for another meeting as well, but I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning. And feel free to always reach out to me. I'm always accessible.
Thanks again, Senator Beck. I really appreciate that advice and you joining. But let's go ahead. I just lost a few videos here or there. I don't know if folks can still hear me or not. But let's go ahead if we can. Okay. All right. Yeah.
There you are. There you are.
Okay. All right. So then with the 15 minutes that we have left, I want to touch base quickly on federal and administrative priorities, but then we're going to talk about, more importantly, next steps and how you can get engaged. And I want to thank folks for a great dialogue so far. So let's take a quick look at the federal policy priorities on the next slide. So this is what people said they want us to be working on with our congressional delegation. And so the top vote getter here so far is ensuring robust federal funding for community development programs. And I think that, my interpretation of that is that reflects what Jessica was talking about with you so far, especially for people, organizations that have 3 months or less of operating budget. I think that there's concern, and they want to make sure that we're going to bat for for funding for community development programs in the future. We're also seeing high responses so far in terms of funding a program to provide temporary financial assistance for renters experiencing economic shock. Again, you see that housing stability keeps rising up to the top again and again in all the different ways that it comes up. Other high vote getters include protecting the lowest income households from rent increases or work requirements that don't improve self-sufficiency, as well as fair housing and the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule. So these are areas that they want us to make sure that we're spending time and effort on. Let's go ahead, certainly want to get any feedback you have, but let's combine that with the next slide of results that we have, which is administrative policy priorities. So on the next slide, you can see this. We've asked for this in terms of, this is looking at both state and federal administrative policy. And this includes a lot of rules that come down. And you can see here that the responses that we've had so far, that informing the Affordable Housing and Community Development Fund and responding to consumer protection rules so far have been among your top responses. And so this again gets to that community development funding process, as well as that consumer protections and looking at federal payday rules. That's something that actually was just affected recently, as well as the CRA rules. That's something else that's come in just in the past few weeks, and actually that's something that that we've been working on in the short term with our Assets and Opportunities Network. We want to keep our members engaged and informed on these issues. One point that I like to pull out that I thought has been interesting here, you could see down at the bottom of this page, we've had some high responses in terms of reducing the administrative burden placed on local service providers. We also have high responses for responding to federal consumer protection rules and regulations. One comment that came up previously that people have said that they're really interested in taking a look at even the administrative process, especially at the state level, that the burden that it takes to respond to state proposals and rules and plans to be able to comment effectively takes a lot of time. And then the comment was that they felt like that they didn't see those results reflected in the final results and in the final rules. So that's, I think, something that's interesting to take to heart, is that people want to be engaged in the process, but they want to see that engagement reflected in the outcome. So before we move on to next steps, any other reflections on any of these federal or administrative policies? Anything we haven't covered? Anything you want us to underline and make sure that rises to the top? Okay, then let's go ahead and move on to what we have on deck prepared for the rest of this year and going into next year. So first I want to pause and say, this is a chance to plug. If you haven't signed up, or if there are people in your organization who haven't signed up to be on our email list, to be signed up for action alerts in our Voter Voice portal, we want to make sure that you do that. You on this call, please be sure to help spread that message so that everybody in your organization and even in your other networks are informed about this. This is a place where we want to get folks involved so that we can have regular communication beyond these regional meetings. We also have a new Facebook group. That's another opportunity to help spur some conversation. Please join that, and please chime in. That is an area for you to help start directing some conversations, and that always filters up to what's on our radar. So on the next slide, here's some policy events that we have coming up. Last year, we started a series of policy and pizza meetings, and we'd like to return to that. We're not sure exactly what pizza will look like, whether we'll be able to be back in person or we may be looking at some sort of virtual pizza meetings. But the purpose there is this year we're going to do those after the elections have happened. Once the dust settles a little bit, we will have some new members at the State House. We will likely have some new congressional members as well, some potential for that. So in mid-November, that'll give us a chance to talk about the final results of those policy surveys, and we should have a good solid idea of what our agenda will look like there. So this is a chance to start getting engaged as we move from survey results to actual agenda items. Then on the next page, you can go ahead and set your calendar. We already have set a date for State House Day, although here again, it could be virtual, it could be in person. We've heard rumors that the session next year, it could even be delayed. It could meet over at the government center. We've even heard that the conference center could end up being the actual physical location. But wherever it takes place, we want to make sure that we get your voice and your opinions to your legislators, and that we help encourage those relationships building, and that we have that dialogue going on. So January 12th, on Tuesday of that week, is when we'll have that State House Day, when we will be taking your voice to legislators. Then on Wednesday, January 13th, I believe it's going to be the kickoff day of a summit. And I'm going to turn it over next to Rita, who could tell you more about continuing meetings and engagements beyond the advocacy spectrum. So thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your input. And again, I'll put in one more plug to make sure to complete those policy surveys so that we can wrap those up and get the results back out to you and all the legislators. So Rita, take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. Speaking of plugs, I think I'll plug my one-on-one meetings. We usually have our regional meetings in the spring, and I think we were feeling a little bit disconnected, and Jessica suggested these one-on-one meetings, and that would be a very big silver lining. I've been able to meet with about 60 members in July and August, and it's really been wonderful. I know Lisa, you and I met, and Tom Moore and I met, and so if you haven't already scheduled, drop me a note, or I'll be contacting you again just to see if we can't meet. It gives me a chance to just dive a little deeper into your world and get a better feeling for what your needs are. And also I'll pick your brain on what you like about our membership, areas we could improve. We want to continue to get better every day. So that's really all I had. And thank you again for joining us, and really appreciate everyone participating.
Yeah, I would echo what Rita has said. We just really appreciate everyone being here. We've heard some of the challenges that you face, some of the things that you've made work better, in light of or in spite of COVID-19. We've talked about, some of the things that are rising up as policy priorities in light of the pandemic as well. Is there anything that we have not covered you were hoping to cover while other members or our team was on today? We've had some folks said, like, raise your hand, flag us down. We've had some people take us up on that. So is there anything that you just want to make sure we're, is on our mind, or that we're working on, or wanted to talk about with other members in these last few minutes? Okay. If there is anything more that you'd like to see us doing, please feel free. We've got all of our contact information here. Reach out to us. Let us know how we can support your organization and those that you serve. And then, just as a reminder, we did mention throwing everyone's name into a draw for credit towards one of our trainings, one of our webinars. So we'll do that. This is the completion of our series of regional meetings, so we'll throw everybody's name in the hat. We'll announce that later. So really appreciate the conversation and through all the work that you're doing in your community to really strengthen the communities across the state. So thank you all, and have a great day. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.